Hey, Jeff Fuller with you again. Jay Fuller Interviews on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and then there's a private Facebook group that you can join. And we're broadcasting from there as well as a YouTube channel. Special guest today is Coach Jim Johnson. Coach, how are you?
Doing great, Jeff. Good
Well,
to have you. Good to see you. It's been a while.
it has. And so trying to stay active during this COVID-19 quarantine. Yourself, not coaching. I know that you do a lot of public speaking. How have you had to adjust your schedule with this new normal?
Well, it's definitely adjusted because I've been a full-time speaker and there's no events right now, so it's made it a little tricky. I've done a webinar. I'm planning on doing another webinar, so just trying to provide some value with people. I'm actually my small staff has been on me for the last couple of years because I've been doing a lot of leadership talks to do a leadership book, and so I've actually started to put an outline together. So that's another thing. So I've been doing more writing than I normally do, which is probably a good thing. And then just trying to stay safe. And I'm a big workout guy, so I get a workout in every day. So that's part of it. And I'm an avid reader. In fact, I do a book recommendation every week. So I try to read a book every week. So I've got enough to keep me going. But certainly, I'm hopeful that we can get back into some. Although I don't know what the new normal will be. That's for sure.
Yeah. So what are the top couple books that you've read recently that you would recommend?
The book that jumps right out to me that I read a few weeks ago was called Atomic Habits.
Yes.
A guy named James Clear. It's a New York Times bestselling book, but I thought it was really fascinating. And he did a lot of research, and some of it I knew, and some of it I didn't, and reinforced some of the things. But there were three things that really jumped out to me. Was that you need to make good habits something that you can do easily, something you can do consistently, and without missing 2 days in a row.
Yeah.
So it was a really good read for me. And actually, because I'm just turned 60, so I've studied quite a bit about finances, which is completely off what I normally do because I'm big into leadership and teamwork, being a coach. But I'm actually reading right now Susie Orman's book of what you should be doing after 50 years old. So that's my latest read. So
Interesting. Hey, so you graciously came on my radio show a few years ago, and this was shortly after J-Mac had that incredible run, and you had that story about him. Could you just jump back in time and just talk about what that was that allowed you to put Jason in the game, and then what happened during that game?
Sure. So Jason, for your listeners, was my team manager for 3 years, and he's on the autism spectrum. And what I admired about Jason so much is he had tried out for our team for 3 consecutive years. The only young man that I coached in my 30 years as a head coach that ever tried out more than twice without making the team. So I always admired his commitment. So his senior year, when he came out, he didn't make the team, but I said I was going to give him a gift. And the gift was for senior night, our final home game, I was going to put him in uniform and hopefully get you in the game. And so with just over 4 minutes to go, I got him in. And, I usually feel like I'm a pretty macho guy, but that night really touched me deeply because when Jason entered the game, we had a pretty good student body following. They called themselves the Six Men. And when he entered the game, they showed all these pictures, these placards of his face. And Jason and I had no idea that was going to happen. And I got so overwhelmed with emotion that Mr. Macho sat down and tears started to flow down my face. Then he gets in the game, and my real dream was I wanted to get him in with enough time so if he could score a basket, I thought that that would be so great. It'd be a memory he would cherish the rest of his life. Well, the first time he gets the ball in the game, he shoots a 3-pointer from the right corner. The crowd stood in anticipation. He missed by like 6 feet. I mean, it wasn't even close. Then the second possession, which you don't see on many of the videos that have become public, he actually had a much shorter shot from about 10 feet. And it hit the backboard and hit the rim. And, I'm a man of faith. So I thought to myself, God's starting to listen. We're starting to get closer. And then his third possession, he shot a 3-pointer from the right wing, and this time magic. It went in, and the place just exploded. And I kid people as I said, God must have been a basketball fan, because not only has Jason scored, he's got a 3-pointer. It can't get any better than this, right? Wrong. For the next 3 minutes, and God rest his soul, that Jason's boyhood idol was Kobe Bryant. Yeah. And in those last 3 minutes, Jason literally turned into Kobe Bryant. He just started making shot after shot. And the two things I'll never forget in those last 3 minutes: about a minute to go, Jason had made multiple baskets, mostly 3-pointers. And I get a tap on my shoulder. I look behind me, and it's Jason's mother, and she is crying her eyes out, and she embraces me and gives me a big hug and shares in my ear, "This is the best gift you could have ever given my son, Coach." And of course, I cried harder. I was so touched. And then the game ends. Jason normally would just run down the court, and our players, one thing that was a great lesson for teamwork that night was I had never asked the team to pass him the ball, yet in those last 4 minutes, out of their own hearts, they passed him the ball every time he got it. In fact, I still kid Jason, because I still see him all the time. "Jason, I'm still looking for your first assist. You never passed the ball once." But the game ends with our Spence support, our opponent that night. I want to give kudos to their coach and their players. They were great sports that night. They score a basket, and our player takes it out. Normally, he throws it right into our point guard, but this time he throws it to J-Mac, and the clock's ticking down, 8, 7. And I'm thinking, they're just going to let him go in. He's going to shoot a layup. Oh, no, he pulls up like 2 feet behind the arc, almost an NBA 3. I'm thinking, Jason, don't shoot for that. It's way too far. He launches a rainbow, and swish, it goes in. And the place just erupts. And the next 5 minutes was like the movie Rudy. I mean, the whole crowd flowed on the floor, all the teammates running on the floor. And I'll never forget, because I mentioned Jason's mother. His parents have an interesting dynamic, because Dad's 6'6", and his mom's 5'2". And this little bitty lady's bobbing through all the mass of people. She gets to J-Mac and she hugs him, and then our players put him up on their shoulders. And at this point, I have no idea how many points he scored. And our public address announcer comes on and says, "The leading scorer for the Trojans tonight, J-Mac, with 20 points." And I'll close with this one thing that I mentioned, Kobe Bryant. Well, later that year, Jason actually was up for the ESPY, for the greatest sports moment of the year. And one of the 4 finalists was his idol, Kobe Bryant. Kobe had scored 81 points in an NBA game that year. And Jason actually beat him out for the ESPY. So that's kind of the cherry on top.
Oh, that's pretty amazing. And you can find that video here on the website, CoachJimJohnson.com, and it's on YouTube as well. But I just suggest you go to that website and just check out J-Mac and Coach Jim Johnson right there. But Coach, had you ever seen, or what's the most points a player had scored in that amount of time of just over 4 minutes?
I can't say that I've ever really statted it. I can't ever remember anyone that ever played either a game that I witnessed or a game that I coached that scored that many points in that short period of time. I mean, sometimes you see somebody score like 10 points in a minute or 2 minutes, but to score 20 points, including 6 3-pointers. In fact, at that time, his other basket, people don't realize his foot was on the line. He was actually probably 2 inches from 7 3-pointers, which actually would have broken our school record. Since then, the record now is 7, but at the time he tied the school record with 6 in 4 minutes. And the funny part is, because you don't see it on any of the videos, but because people say, did the other team let him go? And they were playing just go to defense. They weren't trying to block a shot. I mean, they're good sports. But the only time they literally just let him score, he had shot a 3, and it was a long rebound. And one of his teammates gathered the rebound and turned and just flipped it to him. And Spencer Port just let him go. And he walked in, he had a wide open layup, no one around, and he missed it. So it gives you perspective here. He made 6 3-pointers, almost 7, and he misses a wide open layup. So.
Now, Coach, from there, you had opportunity to do multiple things. One is to write a book, A Coach in a Miracle. What was that process like to write a book? Was that your first book? And I know you mentioned that you're working on something else as well, but talk us through that process.
Yeah, so I actually had a co-author. His name was Mike Latona, and ironically, Mike was a high school friend of mine, and he was actually our team scorekeeper in high school, and he became a writer for a local sports paper, and then later for a Catholic paper called the Catholic Courier. And Mike has two sons on the autism spectrum, so the JMAC game touched him deeply. And so we collaborated. It took us about 2 years. We're really proud of how the book came out. And then it came out in 2011. And then I stayed on and coached until 2016. So when I finished, I did an updated epilogue, and I actually put it in paperback now. So so we have an updated version of the book. So the process is it's you know what, it's something you got to consistently do every day. And I know, as I said, we're very proud of how it came out, but books are challenging. You really got to put a lot of time and effort, and we did. We put a lot of time and energy to come up with an end product. But it's like anything, and I brought up that. Atomic habits, and the fact that if you're consistent and develop good habits, writing a book is anything else. So,
and I was going to bring up that crisis does not make character, but it reveals character. Mm-hmm. And this is something that has been said over and over, and I want to restate it, that you had that character of being a tremendous coach, for having those principles revealed in the book long before you ever became famous with Jason McElwain scoring those 20 points. Could you just talk a little bit about how you grew up and where that leadership process developed?
Yeah, so I was fortunate. I grew up in a big family. I was the oldest of six, and both my parents were educators. In fact, my dad was my high school basketball coach. So I really kind of followed in his footsteps. I wanted to be a teacher and coach. Although when I was a senior in high school, I thought I was going to play in the NBA, but that didn't work out. What I learned a lot about, principles from my parents. They were good models, and they were both, as I said, educators. And then from after that, I got an opportunity to be a head coach pretty young in my profession at 25 years old. And as I kid people, it's a good story now, but at the time it wasn't. I actually, it was a program that wasn't very good. And I thought with my great coaching acumen, I was going to lead this team from the outhouse to the penthouse. Well, I didn't. In fact, I led that team to 17 consecutive losses that year, and they ended up letting me go. And it was a very humbling experience, but it ended up being, from a professional experience, probably one of the best things that ever happened to me, because of what it did is it made me realize that I was probably overconfident. Some people would call it arrogant. And I realized I had a lot to learn about coaching and leadership. And that's when I really started to study. And that's what I talk to young people a lot about. If you want to be successful in any endeavor, you got to make it a study. You got to learn as much as you can about that. And then the other part for me was I used it as a motivator. I think it's often great when you have a failure to realize that, what, I'm going to prove that I can do this. And so that I've told people that, that was over 35 years ago, and I still don't forget it. It was like yesterday. Mm-hmm. And every time that after that, that I felt like I didn't want to do something, I always went back and said, nope, I'm never going to go back to that experience like that again. So, so use failure is a way that you can, use it as a stepping stone for success, because we're all going to fail. And it's how we respond to failure is the difference.
Oh, certainly true. And basketball is really a small fraternity. And when you get to know different people and you build friendships, it's just a great time. Could you just talk a little bit about your relationship with the Van Gundy brothers and how you were introduced to them?
Well, actually, ironically, the year that I lost my job, varsity job, the next year I took an assistant's position with a coach. His name was Coach Van Gundy, and it was actually Jeff and Stan that have both coached in the NBA. It was his father. They grew up in California, and they moved to the East Coast in Rochester. Coach Van Gundy was actually the head coach at SUNY Brockport, but then ended up losing that position like I did, and got another chance at a local junior college, where he ended up having a stellar career. And I was fortunate enough to be his assistant. And the older son, Stan, and I were the same age. At that point, he was a Division III coach, and Jeff was just finishing. He was a local high school coach. So little did I know that fast forward, both of them have been head coaches in the NBA more than once. So it was but Coach Van Gundy taught me a lot and really helped me get back on my feet. Although high school was really why I wanted to be. It was a great learning experience for me.
And Coach Jim Johnson, you said that Jason McElwain's still part of the program. I know that he's helped you coach in the past. Could you just talk about his development over these several years, and how is Jason doing?
Jason's doing fine. He's struggling a little bit with the fact that, right now there's no sports, which is a huge part of his life. Jason actually, after that year, ironically, we went on. I had never won the Section 5 championship as a head coach. And his senior year, we ended up winning it for the first time. And then we won it again the next year, and Jason was not involved. He'd come to some games. But then the following year, he came back one day and he said, Coach, I really missed the program. Can I come back and help? And he was my volunteer assistant for 9 years. So we spent a lot of time together. And we ended up winning 4 more championships together. So as I kid people, for a small fee, I will run him out for you because he's got a Midas touch. But Jason is done well. He was my assistant. He also has helped out at the school, Greece Athena, in multiple sports. And then he's hooked on to one of my former colleagues, and he helps him. And he's helped both at Athena and other schools where my other colleague is coached at some other schools as well. And he still loves it. Ironically, he was a runner in high school and had gotten out of it. And while he was coaching with me one day, he comes in and he says, Coach, I love coaching. I really appreciate you having me part of the program. I said, oh, it's great to have you. He goes, but I need to get back into being competitive myself. I said, really? What are you going to do? He says, I'm going to run a marathon here in Rochester. And I said, really? And of course, because we teach our players goal setting all the time. I said to him, well, what's your goal for the marathon? He says, Coach, I'm going to qualify for the Boston Marathon. Now, I don't know how many of your listeners know about running marathons. I'm a runner, so although I have not run a marathon, I'm very understanding of times. And I said, Jason, what is the qualifying time in the Rochester Marathon to get into Boston? He says 3 hours and 5 minutes. I nearly fell down because, Jason, you realize how fast that is? And he goes, oh, Coach, I'm working with Coach Shoemaker. He was our cross-country coach. He says, he's got me training, and I can do it. And I said, okay. He runs the first Rochester Marathon, 3 hours, 1 minute, and 52 seconds.
Oh, my goodness.
Then the crazy part is he could have gone the next year, and he decided, he tells me a couple of days later, Coach, I'm not ready. I got to prove to myself I can do it one more time. Well, the ironic thing is the next year when he could have gone is when they had the bombing at the Boston Marathon. So it was a blessing. But he runs the Rochester Marathon again and runs it even faster, runs it like 3 hours, 52 seconds. So he goes to Boston. I said, J-Mac, what's your goal for that? He says, I want to break 3 hours, Coach. I said, Jay, Boston's a much more difficult course than Rochester. He goes, I know, I'm upgrading my training. Doesn't he? First Boston Marathon, 2 hours, 58 minutes, and 46 seconds. And what I always tell people is, you know what? I don't believe you can do everything in life, but I think you can do a lot more. And Jason's a great illustration of that.
I certainly agree with that. And I just wanted to bring up this last picture before we transition to a UVM product, Anthony Lamb. But seeing Jason McElwain as a boy, now becoming a man, and knowing that you played a role in that. Just talk to us a little bit about that, about taking on that role, but what type of satisfaction do you feel now?
I feel extremely happy to see the development of Jason. I mean, he's a little guy. Now, the interesting thing is that people don't realize in that game, he was tiny. He was 5'9", maybe 125 pounds soaking wet. He grew after high school. I thought he might get a spurt because his dad is tall. He's 6'6", but his mom's quite small in stature. And he did. He is almost 6'2" and 175 pounds now. So he's really blossomed physically. But just to see how much that helped him with his confidence and the fact that, he wants to give back. Jason and I do some work with our local autism organization, and the fact that he just loves helping young people and, with training and various things he does and being a good example. So, and I'm really proud of Jason. And, it was great that we had this special night, but the thing that I'm so proud of is the fact that how much our relationship continued to grow after that special night.
And Coach, CoachJimJohnson.com is where you can find more information. You talked to me once about how you had John Wallace's son on your team. John Wallace was a standout at Syracuse. You made the Final Four. Could you just talk about what it's like coaching athletes that are well above that typical high school player, those that do make it beyond and go to the next level?
Well, as a coach, I think the major thing is you're trying to build relationships and help young people with, is our mission statement for our program was to develop winners on and off the court. So, it was really important to us, no matter where they were, whether they were great players or average players, that we helped them both on and off the court. And certainly as our program, as I mentioned, Jason's team was the first one that ever won a sectional championship. But then we went on a really, really good run. I coached a lot of really good players. And in fact, in my last, we had never made the finals until Jason's senior year. I made the six times I made the semifinals, and we lost in a bunch of times. And then in my last 11 years, we made the finals 8 times and won 6. So it was crazy. So I got the opportunity to coach quite a few very good players, some of them that have gone on and excelled, even in college. So it's a neat thing, when you get an opportunity to coach, really talented guys. But, as a coach, I think the biggest thing is if you can develop people, in your sport and outside, and helping them with the biggest game, the game of life, I think that's what coaching is all about.
And one player that we are happy that you sent our way is Anthony Lamb. Anthony Lamb, I actually was surprised that he stayed after his freshman year at UVM because he did so well, and you wondered if he had looked for greener pastures, so to speak. But talk to us a little bit about Anthony Lamb, and are you surprised at all of his success at Vermont?
Well, first of all, Anthony was one of the most driven young men that I've ever had the pleasure to coach. He had a great drive to be excellent. And so certainly I didn't know I thought he would have a really good college career. I think he exceeded my expectations. I didn't expect him to come in right here, as a freshman and really play really, really well. But Anthony was one of those guys. Certainly he's a talented guy, and kind of his downside. I remember one of the, the big time, college coming in and looking at Anthony, said, "You know what, coach, if he was 6'9", he would play anywhere in the country." And you know what? So when he came to Vermont and he had that great freshman year, when he came home, I talked to him and he says, "Coach, I just absolutely love it there. I love the coaching staff. I love the players. I love the environment. It's the right place for me." And it's really good to see because he had a special career there. He was a conference player of the year twice in a row. And the sad part is I got a chance. I saw him play every year at least once. But usually there were road games because they're a lot closer to me. And I promised them that I would go to the University of Vermont to see him his senior year. And I didn't. They lost that game. So, which they didn't lose many, at home for sure. So, Anthony was just, and you know what? The great thing is he not only is a really good basketball player, he's a great kid. He's really a good person. So
that's what I've heard. We've had some different athletes go to UVM's basketball camp, and they said that Anthony Lamb always makes time just to talk, and whether you're the best player on the floor or just a player trying to improve, he makes that time. And I think that's a credit to you as well. When he was in high school, was he a 3-point shooter, or is that something that you allowed him to take in?
At the end of his career, he was. One of the things that was my philosophy is changed this number of years ago, especially as the game changed, where the 3-point shot became such a bigger part of the game. Because Anthony, his freshman year, he did play varsity for me, but he was quite a bit overweight. He was probably 6'3", 6'3.5", but he was like 250 pounds. So you could see that he had ability. And he had a nice touch, but he played more inside. He did shoot a couple threes, but not too often. And, we talked after every offseason. I said, Anthony, you can shoot threes if you can, and we would set goals for him, help him, as far as the percentage. Like, if you shoot threes and you're only shooting 20%, you aren't going to be shooting threes. And to his credit, you know what, he accepted that challenge, and he spent a lot of time on his game, and he made himself quite a good shooter. In fact, his senior year was the only year I think would have been the first player in our history of our section to win 4 straight sectional championships. Wow. His senior year, we lost in the finals, but I got a quick little story that was kind of neat, because one of the things we did with our team every year is before every game, we would do a team imagery session. In Anthony's senior season, we were in a very hard-fought semifinal game, and we were down 3 with under 10 seconds to go. And he came down, and he was smart enough, because the other team tried to foul him, but he went up in the act of shooting behind the 3-point line. And now there's like 6 seconds to go. We're down 3, and he's got 3 foul shots. And doesn't he make all 3? And we win in overtime. And we end up going to the finals. We lost. That was the only final that he lost. But it just goes to show how much he had improved. Because as a freshman, I'm not sure I would have wanted him in that situation. By the time he was a senior, he was quite confident in his ability to make shots.
And so this is a picture of Anthony Lamb in his practice jersey at the University of Vermont, Patrick Gymnasium. Could you just talk a little bit more, not just about Anthony, but about different players on their work ethic? How important is it that kids develop, even during this quarantine, to put up shots, do some ball handling? It doesn't take much talent to hustle. How important are those factors for you, and how did you get players to really buy in that there was no off season?
Well, those are things that we incorporated, in the fact that, like, one of my leadership philosophy is what we call leave a profit. And what simply we try to instill in our players each day is that we're going to do the best we can, and we're going to try to make a difference each day and get a little bit better each day. And most of our players embrace that. And Anthony certainly did. Every year he got better and better. And I'll tell you another real quick story about Anthony. There's a fitness test called the pacer test. And basically what it is I think it's a 20 meter from line to line. You can do it in the gym. And the concept is every 8, the speed of the pedometer gets a little faster. So in kids, a lot of times in our physical education classes would bow out early. And it used to really disappoint me. And I would talk about, doing the best you can and, showing your character. Well, Anthony in his senior year was 6'6", probably 220 pounds. And he did over 100 in the pacer test. Wow. The only kids that beat him in the school were like 3 cross-country runners. And I used to bring that up to all our players of, that's what makes Anthony special, is the fact that, here's a kid that now, everybody's admiring because he's a talented athlete, but no, what's inside of him, the ability to do your best every single day, not just on basketball, but anything you embrace. And I think that was a great idea for what we were looking for in our players, someone that was going to do their best in all aspects of life, not just things they like.
And I definitely believe that during this time, it's going to reveal a lot of character and develop a lot of kids for later years. CoachJimJohnson.com is the website. Coach, we're so grateful that you made some time. I just had a couple final questions, and that has to do with the ESPN documentary, The Last Dance. Michael Jordan, it's when I was in high school. I just loved that time of year. However, I was a Los Angeles Lakers fan. I don't know why, but being in Vermont, I just chose them. When you look back at that documentary or those players, you mentioned how failure drove you. Can you relate to that aspect of Michael Jordan always playing with a chip on his shoulder, whether it was because his older brother or his
Mhm.
father or the fact that he was cut as a sophomore in high school?
Yeah, I think, the great thing about Michael Jordan, in fact, I do a blog every week, and this week I did a bunch of quotes, and one quote that I used in there was Michael Jordan's quote about the I I continue to fail and fail and fail again, and that's why I'm successful. It's something
Yeah,
along those
yeah.
lines, and that's the power of Michael Jordan. The fact that he always had it internally that I was going to prove that I can do this. And I mean, he learned a lot, and because he came in the NBA, and he was a dominant player right away, but his team wasn't winning, and so he had to figure out, that I need more than myself, to do this, to win in a team sport like basketball. As great as he was, he did needed a good coach in Phil Jackson, and he needed good players like, certainly Scottie Pippen, amongst others. And when they developed that, but the thing I admired about Jordan is just his drive for greatness. That he was never satisfied. That he was always looking to develop. Because when he came in the league, I mean, he was such an extraordinary athlete, but he was not a real good shooter. And by the end of his career, he was known as a guy that could really shoot. So.
And it was a great time of year. Do you think with this COVID-19, basketball will return this season? Or as a sports fan, as a former coach, do you think it should?
Well, it's a great question. One, because I don't have really any medical background to be able to say, I'm optimistic that they will be able to do something, and hopefully get some kind of basketball back, before this year ends, and certainly for other sports as well. And you know what, I think, with all the great minds we have, not only in the U.S. but around the world, I think that they're going to come up with some remedies so that people can be safe. And I'm optimistic that this will be a stumbling block for us. We'll learn a lot about ourselves, and we'll be better for it.
And Coach, I'll get you out on this question. You said that you've become a tennis player.
Yeah.
I've played tennis a little bit. I have zero lateral movement. What does that say about me being a high school defender?
It probably is not going to help you.
That's why I was on the bench. But hey, Coach, thanks so much. We wish you all the best. And hey, we're excited about that new book. Hopefully that'll get put together.
And move forward. And it was great to catch up with you, Jeff. And thanks for having me.
All right, Coach. And you've been listening to Jay Fuller Interviews, YouTube channel, Facebook group, Instagram, Twitter. We're so glad that you've made some time today. Like, share, and just let's tell this story about Coach Jim Johnson and the heroes that he's made.